This is the Aptitude Outdoors podcast, where we interview conservationists, hunters, anglers, and outdoorsmen and women to bring you the greatest stories, information, and advice from the best in the world.
The first thing I gotta know is, I didn't get to ask you this when we met in person at the Hunt Fish Podcast Summit, but how does one get the name Captain Scooby? That's an interesting name.
Okay. Well, this goes back probably 30 years, I guess. I did a radio show in Houston. It was a 3-hour radio show with a guy named Bob Stevenson, and his dad was Pappy Stevenson. Well, Pappy started the first radio program, I don't know how far back now, when the Bassmasters from Ray Scott started. So he actually did a radio show in Houston. Okay. So what they would do is Junior would go to the Bassmaster, all the tournaments, and he would broadcast live back then to Houston, and then they put it on the air. It was a 3-hour radio show in the morning from about 4 o'clock to 7 a.m. So long story short, he would call all the guys along the coast and say, hey, give your report. So what I did when I was working for the radio station, per se, as a contractor, they would send me down under the Scooby name. So I went to lodges and outfitters and guides and hunting guides. I would go in as Scooby. So what we would do, during the 3-hour show, the outfitter would call in and give his report. Hey, the ducks are good. The redfish are biting. This is what we're catching them on. We're whacking them. And then all of a sudden you talk to the other guys that have been there 30 years and like, we're not catching anything. Who is this new guy coming up? So what would happen, they'd send me down there to go out on the trips. And then I'd call the producer at like 4 a.m. the next morning and say, hey, we caught 1 redfish, 1 trout. But then the guy would get on the air and go, well, we caught all limits of reds. We caught 20 trout. And then when the show's over, Bob Stevenson would say, you're off the air because you lied to our clients, our radio base. So then they found out who Scooby was. Scooby was Steven Stubbe. So that's kind of how it is. Everybody knew me as Scooby.
Yeah.
Anywhere I went out, it was Scooby. So when you're on the air, everybody knows who Scooby-Doo is. Or Scooby's live on the air doing that report or something. In the mornings, the deal was if you used your real name on the air, they would call you at home at 2 a.m. with chickens in the background and pigs honking. And it's like, hey, I got to have a stage name. I can't be giving out my name anymore. So that's how Scooby got involved. So, and then in my heavy equipment business, we've had for 40 years. Whenever I did service work out anywhere with ships or whatever, everybody knew me as Scooby. So the whole industry in the heavy equipment business knew me as Scooby. So if you had Scooby on the job, they knew who it was.
All right.
Pretty cool.
Well,
so
that's pretty interesting. That's not what I thought, but that's definitely an interesting story.
What did you thought?
I just thought I had to do something with your last name.
Stubbe? Well, that's kind of how it started. Scooby, Stubbe, or Scooby-Doo, and that's kind of how it started. I wish I had a nickel for every time Scooby-Doo was mentioned, but maybe a quarter. It's inflation today, maybe $1.
Well, hey, I love hunting, I love fishing, and I love America. And with the 4th of July right around the corner, Uncle Louie's Fireworks wants you to celebrate this holiday responsibly. Uncle Louie's Fireworks is one of the only stores in the area that sells subtle fireworks, which emit less noise but still put on a great show, so you can enjoy a fireworks display without alarming wildlife, sensitive pets, and people who are averse to loud noises. They also offer fireworks ignition systems that allow you to set off fireworks with your phone to assure you still have all those very valuable fingers come your favorite hunting and fishing seasons. Uncle Louie's Fireworks, located at 7300 Schnipke Drive, Ottawa Lake, Michigan, just off US 23 Exit 1, wishes you a safe and happy 4th of July. The cool thing is that you're a guide. You also make custom fly rods, so I want to talk about all of that.
Okay.
But where did you get your start in the guiding business? Because everybody I know that is a guide just tells me how much work it is. I mean, you're getting up at 2, 3 in the morning. You're out until dark. I mean, that's a lot of work for people to catch a few fish. So how'd you get involved with that?
With the fly part of it only, or the guide part? I mean, there's so many facets to mudfish adventures. We do all kinds of things.
Let's start with how you got into guiding, and then we'll go down the fly fishing rabbit hole.
Well, as being a troubleshooter, electrical and hydraulic kind of engineering kind of guy, I used to do a lot of jobs offshore and all over the country and troubleshoot. It's a lot of stress. when you walk in a piece of equipment and try to figure out a problem that no one's been able to handle. So I bought a lake houses, and what I did is I rent different lake houses for a year. And then we decided where we wanted to retire in 20, 30, 40 years. So that's where we went to the different lakes. So I come here to Toledo Bend, bought the property, and I tore up like 5 or 6 boats, total of 7 over time. Toledo Bend is a stumpy lake, and you don't know where the minefield is when you're going full blast with a full load of people with you. Long story short, I had a custom boat built. It's called a Gator Tail. And I was flying out on a helicopter to Louisiana to go offshore, and this guy was going down a canal full blast. Wah! Big rooster tail. And I'm thinking, he's going through everything. So I followed him to the local watering hole. So I went there and said, hey, I introduced myself. What is that? Well, I just came up with him. It's called Gator Tail. I was about 12 years old. So I asked him, I said, can you build me something? I'm guiding or whatever. But you're back to your question about guiding. We had the custom boat built. It got here. We had it painted black. There's another whole story to all that. It took it 2 years to develop, a year to develop, 2 years to get it all done, 3 years total. I started fishing, and people noticed in my loud engine, like an airboat, and a big rooster tail that's probably 15, 20 feet up in the air everywhere I go. It's got headers on it. And it started to be known as who was that guy. And then all of a sudden the neighbors realized I was catching fish where nobody else was, because I was going in the backcountry in the swamps, not just with a fiberglass boat on the main lake. And I had to close the gate. I'm here on 10 acres on the water. So I had to close the gate. Whenever they would see my truck up for the weekend, the neighbors would come over. Hey, can you take us out? Can you take us out? Can you take us out? And that's how it all started. That was probably the boat, probably 13 years old now. And that's kind of how it started as a guide service. But I've been fishing probably since the 70s, 77, 76. Wow. So that's how the guide in a short version.
Yeah.
Well,
yeah. The one thing that is interesting is you do fly specific trips, which anywhere I've ever been is pretty uncommon. I mean, there are fly outfitters and fly guides in a lot of places, but they specifically do that all the time.
Exactly. Yes,
I don't think from the way I think about it, Toledo Bend is a very fly heavy place. So how did you end up going from guiding and then getting into fly fishing guiding, especially when you do a lot of bass? That's
we do strictly bass here for bass and brim and crappie and stuff like that in a seasonal pattern. When they're shallow, the bass go shallow. When the crappie, a month or two later, they'll go shallow. We have gar in the summertime underneath the lights of docks. We'll throw big shiny looking flies, and we'll probably have 100 gar hit that at night. It's just crazy. But how it all started on the fly thing there, I was out, watching the big pros. They're throwing a jig and pig real fast and going. And I was way back in the swamp. It was 15 foot of water. I'll never forget it. It was a big cypress tree. Probably I couldn't put my hands around it. Drops off to 15 feet. Well, I flipped that jig and pig over there, and just soon as it hit the water, something rolled on it like a tarpon, that big. Just rolled on it. So I said, well, that's fascinating. We're going too fast. We're actually casting and going. Our mind is caught. Let's go. We're all in that time zone BS per se. So I thought, what can I have? I had a swimming pool at the other house in Houston. This was just our weekend home. And I thought, I'm in the swimming pool. What does your hair do? It kind of undulates down slowly. This gave you a bigger idea?
There you go.
Yeah. Okay. All right. I'm just going to set these here. I don't know if you can see them. So what happened was, okay. I know this is a long going story here. I get to going here. A jig and pig, when you throw it in the water, it hits the water and it falls down pretty fast. A fly, about this size, call it the tail feather. But when we throw that in there, I wanted something to hit the water and just kind of like a dying shad or something. That's what I wanted. So we started off with the tail of the chicken. Now we're throwing the whole chicken. So we're looking for one over 10 pounds. I've got 8 broken rods.
Oh.
Here are some of the 8 broken rods with clients and customers because we can't hold them. So I developed what's called the short flyer fly rod about 10 years ago. This one right here. Well, these are already broke, so anyway. This is called a short flyer. I don't know what you can see here.
Yeah.
This is the one piece, 7'6", but you'll notice it flexes all the way back to here.
Yeah.
So we don't have a lot of tip here because this is what we call a medium flex. And if you'll notice, the actual eyes actually float on the rod. Can you see it? I don't know if you can see that.
Yeah, I can see that.
The way we developed it here. I haven't broken one.
Wow.
I'm using 30-pound tippet, and we're using floating fly line. We're in 35 feet of water, mainly throwing these big flies. So I just, I don't know if you've seen that post I had today for yesterday. I had some people in, 2 gentlemen, and they were throwing glide baits like this. And I took a picture and put it on my Facebook. They're going to be coming back. Water's a little too hot for what we did. But I got some video of it. I'll try to put that out on my Facebook stuff pretty soon. So that's kind of how it started, the fly thing. And then people started coming to me. And then Orvis came down and spent 3 days with me, the Orvis Fly Company. Mm-hmm. It was back to the 1800s. They came down and said, hey, we think you got the right stuff, so would you like to come on board as the Orvis Indoor Fishing Guide? So that's kind of how people come here from all over the world, Russia, China, Poland, Germany. Oh, I can't even think of all of them. I'm out of breath. So it goes out in Orvis Worldwide book. So people know they have the confidence in an Orvis name. They know the top guys, treat them right, and there's no BS per se. And that's the standard I'm at right now. So we're trying to be the highest caliber person we can be as a guide and a custom rod builder and rod designer. And people come in here all the time. Just, hey, can you build me this? Can you build me that? So it's not going to be cheap.
Yeah.
So I don't worry about cheap. I worry about quality.
And that's, well, I mean, if you were going to go, I went to my first Orvis fly shop the other day. They don't sell a rod for less than $300. You know, you can't go in there and just buy some cheap junk. And so we met at the podcast summit, and we were just so busy we didn't get really to talk too much.
Right. Yeah.
But we've been talking a lot since then, and I ended up, long story short, you know, you're putting out a podcast in the coming future. I've been working on that, and in exchange, you sent me a custom rod, which I have here.
What Scooby, a deal!
The Scooby Custom. It's the first custom rod I've ever owned, and I don't have that much experience fly fishing. So, like, everybody knows that listen to this podcast, but I can tell I've had a lot of bad rods. You know, I've had a lot of cheap rods, and I've talked nothing but awesomeness about this rod since you sent it to me. I was having really a hard time casting. I had a TFO, just like your common kit. It was like a $200 combo or something.
Yeah. The starter kit, we call them. Mm-hmm.
Yeah. And then I got this rod, and I immediately started casting maybe like 20 to 30 feet to maybe closer to 60 feet within a couple of days.
Right.
And I honestly, you were telling me that was going to happen, but I didn't believe it because I was like, there's no way. So what separates what is with your traditional combo kit, even your higher end rods, from what you've built?
I guess this, when we say the box store kind of fly low-end product, they don't do a certain things. And what we call spline a rod. Do you know what that word splining a rod means?
I've heard it, but I don't know what it is.
All right. Let me get a piece of paper and I'll explain what happens. This is a blank. This is a one-piece blank where it all starts. But to get the rod to load, meaning when it goes back, it has a line come back and it loads backwards and then it goes forward. You'll notice on your rod, you're probably more accurate on the cast. If you notice that, it's always hitting the target. Everything is not 4 feet to the right, 4 feet to the left. So what happens is when you take a piece of fiberglass, whatever, it's what we call the backbone or the. Here's how it is. We have mesh material. It's folded like this. And you'll notice it has a spine or a backbone right here. Can you see that? I don't know. Mm-hmm. That's called the spline. So that gets a buildup. If you'll think about it, it has double material here, right?
Yep.
See that? Okay. So when this is all rolled around a steel mandrel, they roll it around and they heat it up and put it in the oven for, so many hundred degrees and let it dry out. So what you need to do is what I do. I actually put the rod on something like this, and I can put the hand here, and I'll put my hand here. Can you see that? I don't know what's on camera here. Mm-hmm. And I'll actually roll it, and you'll see where that mark is right there. You'll see it popping. You feel it. You'll feel it pop. There it is right there. All right, so what I did is I marked that with just a wax pencil. So if that's the way the rod is bending, when I put the eyes on for a fly rod, I'll put it on this side. So when it's bending onto that load of that fish, it's actually taking the load properly, and it's also casting further because it's not fighting sideways trying to line up straight like a rifle in a rod on on a rifle. It's going to shoot straight. If that spline is bent off to the side, when you cast it, it's going to go to the right. Because once it loads and unloads, it stays straight. It's loading and unloading. I don't want it to do a circle, because when you finish the circle on the load, it's going to go to the right or left. So the spline is very important when we design a rod from the ground up. You have to get it correct. So you can go back to your closet, go to your rod shop, or you can go ahead and pick up your rod. You do the same thing on any hard surface table, and you can find out if it's right. I don't know if I ever got to talk to you about that, but the podcast did. Who was there? I think, anyway, there was a showman I showed to. And then we do a blueprint of everything we do. So everything is lined up, designed. We have another system back there. We actually load the rod all the way to the ground and see where the line doesn't touch the blank, so that it has no drag, no resistance on that also. So you get further casting, more accuracy, and that's the short of that. In a long words.
It's astounding how much more accurate it is. I mean, I'm not an accurate caster to begin with, because I'm just starting out. But I was fly fishing last weekend. I always bring a fly rod with me, and there wasn't much room in the car, so I had to take the little combo kit, because this is a 2-piece, and I could not cast it where I wanted it to go. I mean, I was in the vicinity, but when I'm casting this rod, it is like dead on every time, even with my lack of experience. And that's really important, because, I mean, when you're sight fishing for a bass, you don't want to be 5 feet to the right. You want to pull that fly right where it needs to be for them to hit it. So,
well, here's a quick one for you. I had a guy come in here one day. He says, "Scoob, I've got a problem with some eyes." So we repair eyes here also. Since we build rods, we have a lot of inventory of different brands. We can just fix the eye, that tips, anything like that. So he came in, I fixed 2 or 3 rods, and I showed him how to spline a rod. So he goes, "That's amazing." He said, "So that's my problem." I said, "What are you talking about?" He said, "When I'm on bedded fish, I'll cast that lure to them, and it'll be 3 or 4 feet to the right or left, and it never hits them and spooks them. So I'm actually pushing fish out because I got the wrong equipment or it's not set up properly." He said, I actually went home. He called me the next day. His name was Eli Tolley. Tolley's got served. Anyway, he called me the next day. He said, "Scoob, I think he said he had 18 rods. Only 1 was right." I said, "Whose brand was on that rod?" He goes, "It was a custom built rod a guy gave me a long time ago. That was the only rod that was correct. Out of all the rods he had, no wonder I'm not spooking fish or not eating the dark." I said, "It's very important." So that custom rod actually put more fish in the boat, accuracy and held the load, more sensitivity. It fits your hand. You measure stuff to your arm, to your wrist. There's so much things we can do in a custom rod without going fancy weaves and checkers and colors. If you just build the rod right, let it do its job. I don't need all the other flash and bling bling. That's not what I do. We try to get you quality equipment for the price.
Yeah, it absolutely is the best rod I own, hands down. No questions asked. All my rods. Yeah,
my loves are going off everywhere. My love pops are going.
You're on camera. Don't cry. It's okay. So another thing that we talk about a lot when we're just chatting on the phone is how forward-facing sonars like change the game. And you said a lot of people come to you specifically because you use that. And how does that help you in your guide business? Because it seems like an amazing tool not only to see fish, but as you talked about to me a lot, is you can see if you're fishing too fast. You can see if you're doing like huge. So how has it changed for you, like the game for you?
Well, I had 2 guys in here from what do you want to call it? Martha's Vineyard or something. They fish 20 times, 25 times a year with guide. That's all they do. And they've never seen the equipment on a boat, which I have. Mm-hmm. And I said, "Guys, watch this. Look, there's oxygen coming off the bottom. There's a thermocline that the lake is turning over from the muck and things from the bottom. It's trying to get the oxygen changed over. There's phones trying to come in. Anyway, long story short, we can see the thermocline. Say this is the depth of water at 15 feet. The thermocline was right here. You could see the fish moving around here, but they wouldn't go past that line. Yeah. They would not go to the bottom, per se. They would always be up here. So that told me whenever we use a lure, don't go past that 5 foot, 8 foot mark. We can do here with some top waters or glides or something else. And that's kind of what was really huge. And then the other thing I showed about said, there's a lot of fish down in the grass and the vegetation that we're not getting to. Watch this. So I actually put the trolling motor on probably 5 to 8, and we were moving pretty fast. And as the trolling motor is shooting down and forward, they were actually, you could see the fish porpoising out of the grass because they were hearing the prop. It's kind of like an airplane coming over you. You're always going to look up. Well, that spooked them.
Yeah.
I didn't know there was that many fish in that area. They're just not biting. So when a customer sees that the guide is doing all he can, the fish just aren't biting. You can see them on the screen and live, like just live action, I guess you want to say. That's huge. Takes the pressure off me as a guide. That he's doing the best he can. They're just not biting. It's just one of those days. High pressure skies. It's hot. Water's hot. That's how the sonars help me. And then on the crappie bite, when you're down deep, you'll see the crappie come over out of the tree and they'll just turn. So what happens if you don't have a custom sensitive rod? You wouldn't even know if you bumped it or anything because the rods aren't built. They're built for cheap production, get them out the door, not a high-end rod. We can actually feel it. And I can tell you some stories on that, but that's another day.
Well, yeah, and no, I love crappie fishing too. Like pound for pound, those little guys can just fight like a bass almost sometimes, especially on light tackle. And I really like fishing for them all times of the year. And that's one of the things, I think that's one of the things that's most frustrating for me as a fisherman. And I've went from just recreational fishing for fun, I still fish for fun, obviously, but I went from just going out in a boat, running around the lake a few times, screwing around, drinking beer to studying advanced bass fishing tactic books, and I'm reading books on crappie habitat and on how they do.
It never ends. It never ends.
No, and it's like becoming more serious because eventually you get tired of not catching anything. At some point you're like, what am I doing wrong? And then you crack this egg, and then you realize how complicated fishing is, and everybody thinks it's this simple thing. And that's something I've started learning about with, thermoclines and, oxygen levels in water and depth and time of year. It's all, every book I read is like, this is this in this situation. If the water's cold and it's sunny and the oxygen's high, then you want to do this. But the next day it could be the exact opposite, and you have to do
absolutely
the thing I'm learning now is the depth control of what you're fishing is very important, and the speed. Important. All the other stuff has a lot to take into play, but like exactly what you just pointed out. And how do you deal with that on with clients? Because some days you do everything right and they, like you just said, they will not bite. I've had days where I'm like, I know there are fish down there. I can see them and I'm putting lures in their mouth and they just want nothing to do with it. And it's the most frustrating thing ever. So how do you deal with that situation as a guide?
As a guide, it's more of a mental game because you want the best for the client. When a client comes to me, I'm scouting 2 days in advance. Here, driving there, going there, trying different things. Because when I set the boat up for a fly trip, the boat is completely gutted out. Only fly equipment goes in that boat. If I'm doing a conventional trip, I take everything out and just put conventional equipment in it, and lures and things like that. I can't do both in the same trip.
Yeah.
There's not enough time. They won't focus far enough. The attitude and everything about the fish changes. So it's a whole different mindset. But I had a problem day for yesterday. I had these guys for 2 days. We did good early in the morning and late in the evening. I talked to some of my other guys, and I talked to a tournament guy on Tuesday. They have a tournament here on Toledo every Tuesday. 6 pounds won the tournament. Does that tell you how tough it is? We're in the top 10 lakes of 2023.
Yeah.
Top 10, we're number 6 for quality bass. So, I think we had bass years back 135 over 10 pounds. The fish are here. You just get those days, high pressure, bluebird skies, you're on a moon phase. That's different. Moon phases even affect. I know you didn't bring that up, but there's another factor that's thrown into it. High pressure, what's going on? Clouds come in a few minutes and all the clouds are gone. It's just a lot for a guide. So
yeah,
we do the best we can, and we all work for tips to know how we did that day. That's kind of my regulator. So if I know I got a good tip, things have changed in the money game here too. I want to say this also. Everything is on a credit card. Nobody carries cash anymore. None of that kind of stuff. I shouldn't even go down that road, but That's how a guy knows if he does a good job. We all give our best 110% all day. All guys do.
Yeah.
I wouldn't say all, but I heard some stories. I heard some stories from these guys, like, take me to the bank right now. A quality guy is worth his weight in gold. Guy that just has a boat that's dirty, has got mold on it. The guy doesn't care, he's sloppy, doesn't dress professional. That's not the guy you want.
Yeah.
You're not going to have a great day. And it's going to give us all
those
that
experiences.
Name. Okay, well.
I won't name any names, but it was not a good time. But, and I mean, for some people, a guide trip is expensive, even if it's only $500-600. I mean, that's a lot of money for some people.
I understand that.
I think the expectation is different per person. Say if $500 is a lot for you, and you're not nailing fish, you're probably like, what the heck? But if $500 is just like a toss in the tip jar, then it's like, well, whatever. I'll do it again tomorrow. So I think that probably comes into play for a lot of people too, because I just like being out on the water, and I generally just have a good time. Like, I understand personally that sometimes fish just don't cooperate. It's not a video game. It's not like set up for you to win. One of the
it's not good answer. It's not set up to win. You're not going to catch me, Captain.
Well, you know what I mean.
Awesome. I know, that's a cool answer. I love it. Go ahead.
One of the things is with Toledo Bend, that's known everywhere as one of the best bass fishing lakes in the world, essentially. And how did you end up at Toledo Bend? Did you live there, or is that kind of a place that you just ended up?
Well, as I was saying earlier, I always leased property for a year on the lake. So Tammy and I have been married over 40 years. We don't have any kids. So we actually got away on the weekends to go somewhere. So that's how we tried where we wanted to go. So the 5 or 6 different places we rented every year, this guy stayed at one of my properties on the Rayburn, which is another hour away from here. Sam Rayburn, it's another top lake. They didn't make the top 10 this year, matter of fact. Toledo Bend did the top 6. I was there on that property. The guy wanted to stay for the week. So I loved the place on the water. We had 5 acres on the water there. And long story short, he came over to Toledo Bend and bought property that weekend. I let him stay. I went back up the next weekend. He said, hey, I bought some property. I'll build a house. So I helped him build a house. Long story short, we drove by this property on the highway. At the time was being put in the front yard. I pulled in there, looked at it real quick, brought the wife up the next week, knocked on the door, said how much, and it was done. So I've been here for 20 years since then.
Nice.
It's just been growing ever since. Just love the lake. But I've been all over the North America, South America, fishing for all species of kind of stuff. And on my last trip down to South America with the AK-47s and the airport problems, and I said, Toledo Bend has everything we had when we were in the jungles, screaming monkeys. We have all that here. We have the terrain. We have moving water. We have backwater water. We have deep water. It has everything here at Toledo Bend. So I'm thinking, why don't I just retire here? And now we built a big shop, 6,000 square feet. The show is like 20 by 60. We designed everything here. The thing is just, it exploded in the fishing thing. What I've been doing it 40 years. People know who I am.
So for fly fishing, it's a little different. I mean, I know rods play a big role in stuff, especially, well, I mean, I guess I can say for any fish species. I mean, fishing bluegill, at certain times of the year, you're going to want lighter rods. It's just more fun to fight. Or sometimes you want longer rods that are sensitive where you can get down deep. And it's the same with bass. I mean, with bass, sometimes you're using big stiff rods, and you're using, you're just ripping crankbaits as fast as you can get them. Sometimes you're fishing real finesse stuff. So you need like a wide array of rods. How does that change with fly fishing? Because I mean, it's essentially you have length and weight from what I can tell. There's the length of the rod, there's the weight of the rod, and then, I mean, there's some specialty rods like two-handed rods and things like that. But how do you decide, like today we're going to use a 5 weight for bass, or today we're going to use an 8 weight for bass, or what? Like, how do you make that decision, or you just kind of use what's more comfortable for the person that's using the rod?
I'm trying to find the load. What the load is. Say bass could be 10 pounds, could be 5 pounds. I need an 8 or a 10 weight. Just throw a larger fly or lure or whatever you want to call it in between. And it has to have enough backbone, so when you load the rod and you bring it against it, you've got to have enough load to keep the fish on and not break the line. Because you've gone down to what, 2 pounds, 3 pounds, or you're using 30. I can have a heavy rod at 30 pound line, 2 pound tipping for a little small fish or big fish. So that's how I determine what I want to do. Now, if I want to go down, like you have a 5 weight, I can catch a bass on that, but I have to have a lot of experience. How much load to put on it? Don't overhorsing. Does that kind of make sense a little bit? Depends on what the species is. Like I've got stuff over here that just came back from Hawaii. Let me go get that. I built this rod for Jonathan Kiley. He owns a company called Fly Skin. I don't know if you've ever seen that logo.
Mm-mm.
Jonathan Kiley's his name on it. This has got eel skin in it, matter of fact. Harley Davidson colored, all silk thread. It's a 2-piece. So you put it on the plane. This is a 12-weight. He's going for a giant trevally along the beaches. And those fish could be 75 to 100 pounds, a little bit more than 100 pounds. So you have to have a rod that'll hold that pretty hard.
Okay.
So I don't want to use a 5-weight because I don't have enough in here. Mm-hmm. And that's just one thing Jonathan said. He said, Scoob, when he got back, he said, your rod had more power in it than anybody else from the store-bought stuff. I said, what are you talking about? He said, you had so much built in the bottom half that I actually forced them in, and then I got another one. The other guys couldn't do that. They just had to hold on. When I was doing at Silver King Lodge in Costa Rica, there were some people that came from overseas, and they would hold on to a fish for 3 hours with lighter stuff, just trying to do it. But that wore that big tarpon out, 130 pound, 120 pound. That wore the poor thing out. You just can't follow them down the beach forever and ever. You want to get them in, release them quick so they'll survive. I mean, if they start looking dead, that shark has got them. Mm-hmm. They're meat. So you didn't really help the species then, just to have a little fun with them. So.
Yeah. Well, luckily it's not a problem I have because I never catch bass that are that big.
Well, you need to come down here on the time. I'm going to call you and say, hey, I'm on them. You need to get down here and we'll throw these big chickens. We'll throw these big chickens here, whatever you want to do there.
That sounds like a good time.
No, it will be a good time.
So,
yeah. I know there's a lot of questions in your mind, ain't it?
There's always a lot of questions in my mind. That's why I have a podcast, because I ask people that know what they're talking about. So we talked a little bit on the phone maybe a week ago about how some people will come down and specifically want to fish for panfish, which is...
Okay.
I mean, I know a lot of people who fish for panfish, but they're mostly older guys. I don't know anybody my age that's like obsessed with panfish, and I love it. I mean, a lot of people that I know are like, oh, those are for kids, whatever. It's not a fun fish. I think they're some of the most fun fish to catch because even if you're having a bad day, you can usually find a couple, and they just fight, and they taste so good. They're one of my favorite fish to eat in the world.
Right,
so,
they're sweet.
Do you have any tips on bluegill? Because I think, or not bluegill specifically, but panfish in general, I think they're underappreciated by some, and fighting them on a light rod is one of the greatest joys of my life. I just love doing it, but they can be kind of a pain to find in the summer. When it gets real hot, I just have a hard time getting on them sometimes. So, like, what is your advice as someone who's been fishing for a lot longer than me? When that spring feeding frenzy and spawning frenzy ends.
What's easy. Everywhere. They're everywhere. Mm-hmm. Okay. Can I go get my purple perch plucker?
You absolutely can.
Can you say that 3 times? Purple perch plucker.
Purple
Let me go get one.
Plucker.
Here is a fiberglass 5-weight. I think this is a 3-piece. I think this is a 3-piece, 3-4 piece.
You said 4-weight?
I think this is a 3-weight.
3-weight.
I built them in a 3 and a 5, but it's hard to get the color purple when I order stuff. This has the custom handles on it. We actually fit the handle to the person that comes here. So we have another machine shop with all the custom handles and all that exotic woods. This is a purple perch plug. Look how much it's thin. It's like when you talk about putting a little fly in there with a little indicator on it. When it's a little. What I use as an indicator is. Let me go get one. I know this is a lot of stuff, but it's a big shop, so let me go grab some. Okay, I'm back at you now.
All right.
Okay, this is an indicator.
Mm-hmm.
Can you see that?
A little tiny one.
It's no bigger than that. So what happens, we'll take the fly line, and we'll use like little 3-pound, 4-pound, small stuff. Run that through, put a bobber stopper top and bottom, and then we'll put this little fly underneath it. And that's what we will flip over there for the perch beds. Now, how do I find the perch beds? Like you're asking. Do you have side scan on your equipment, on your boat at all? Okay, what I'm looking for when I'm going along the water, I have side scanning going out 50 feet, 7,500 feet. And I'm looking for craters going across a point or a back shallow flat. And I've got the boat shooting sonar out to the side. Mm-hmm. And all of a sudden I see craters, like moon craters. Mm-hmm. Those are brim beds.
Yep.
Turn the boat around, put the power hose down, and start throwing that little stuff in there. Top water first to see if they're there. A little top water grasshopper, and that's a blast.
Yeah.
And this is and this brings me back up to what you said earlier. I had some clients, and we were catching crappie in shallow water. All of a sudden, bass in shallow water. And then I had a guy from Poland and a guy from Russia and Poland. They were two engineers, and they said, we don't want to bass fish anymore. I said, what do you mean? He says, you have perch. I couldn't understand the pooch or whatever. Something. You mean like old brim?
Yeah.
Yeah. So they went back out their 3-weights. Long story short, we went back out. I knew where some beds were. They from the topwater pencil poppers, just having a blast. I mean, it's like a wolf pack. Here they come, right? It's like, So I called another guy that's a crappie guide over in Louisiana. I said, name's Burley. I said, Burley, come over here. I said, these guys I touched the ball yesterday on these little perch, brim, what do you want to call them? Bluegill. Instead of, y'all have different perch up north, I guess.
Yeah.
You call it perch.
Yellow
we call
perch.
Them bluegill. Yeah. So yellow perch, would you call it bluegill or a suncracker?
There's just yellow perch, which is a perch fish. And then there's we'll just address this now. Coming from Ohio and coming down to Texas with all you guys, everybody's catching all these fish. Like, I caught this shell cracker, I caught this perch. I'm like, those are all bluegill. And they're like, no, they're perch or they're shell crackers, or they call them brim. And I was like, this fish has too many names. But anyway, we're on the same page here. We're talking panfish, sunfish.
Right. So we went and did a video. Folks. Right. So we went and did a video. I said, let's go catch some of these brim, because I used to catch them in the rivers, like you said, on the Guadalupe and San Antonio. Do it a long time ago. Deer hunting, we'd always go get them. You want to call them perch or brim? What do you want to call them?
Let's stick with brim.
Okay, we'll stick with brim. Okay. Long story short, we went out and did a video, and the video went within an hour. I don't even think it went an hour. It went 1,000 views. 3 hours later, it went 3,500 views. I said, this is crazy. But what happened is Grandpa, they used to do that all the time. That's what they fed on. And the younger generation doesn't know how much fun that is. So I'm kind of bringing all that back. So we started doing the fly rods for that. And now I do brim trips for people. That's all they want to catch. We'll go out. So that's kind of what we developed, the kind of purple perch plucker. We have them a couple of different colors. You just have to order one and have to wait to get it. That kind of thing. I'm just one guy. I build everything myself here in the shop. So I'm either fishing, guiding, or building. So I've got to be diversified, because some days it's too hot to fish. Some days it's too cold. So we come in here, we build rods, we teach classes, we do fly time stuff. I don't know if you can see that back wall. I didn't turn it, but I have over 500 books on the top lines from all over the world.
Wow.
So when people come here, if you want to make a grasshopper, I got a book over there. We'll set up the table and teach you how to page by page to do that grasshopper. And we put it back on the book, and that's my private library.
That's a rabbit hole I haven't gone down yet. I'm scared.
Oh, yeah.
I'm scared what'll happen. Yeah.
Lots of money.
So I was getting at earlier is, once they're off the beds, once they're done spawning, they go fairly deep. I mean, they're usually, that's where I have the hardest time finding them, because my boat isn't very maneuverable, and the water in the lakes that I've been fishing, it can go from 5 foot to 30 foot in a few feet. And it's really hard. I mean, I have either a pontoon boat or just your standard aluminum boat that every fisherman's had when they were 10 years old, with just a standard trolling motor on it and stuff. So when I want to find them deep, like this time of the year coming up right now, they're up where I'm at. They're probably done with the spawn. They're moving into deeper water. It's getting pretty warm.
Yep.
What do you do as a guide? Are you just kind of going with the scanner and looking around to see if you can find clusters of them on weed edges?
They'll mainly go to brush piles or standing timber, or they'll go to leaning timber off the bottom or something. Here's something that probably a lot of people don't know. In the crappie system right now, I've talked to a lot of crappie guys do my report, and they say we're catching a lot of brim, for perch. And what they found out the other day, when I was out with one of them the other day testing our rods, crappie rods, if they move up on the forward-seeking sonar, the actual crappie will move off. But the brim, he said, if the brim stay in the brush pile, the crappie are comfortable. Isn't that kind of where, like nature, if a deer is looking for crows and crow starts hollering,
Yeah.
then everybody's on alert, right? So that's the same thing in a fish, and probably never thought about that, have you?
Yep.
Yeah, exact same thing happens. If it's just one species there, they know to be on the guard for a shark coming in and getting some of them. But if there's more species there in a bigger aquarium, everybody's happy. It kind of goes.
Yeah, that makes sense. And it's so much different talking about, I mean, I'm talking very specific lakes, the ones that I have. I'm kind of lazy. You know, I'm fishing the lakes that I have access to really easily.
Okay.
And there's one lake that I fish, and I am not kidding you. I've done the scan of the whole lake with my Garmin fish finder.
Okay.
I went and I drove for like an hour just back and forth, just making sure I had a map of the lake. There's not a single piece of structure in that entire lake. Not a bump, not a hump, not a rock pile, not a tree. And I'm like, what is this? Am I fishing on the moon? This is absurd.
That's amazing.
There's a big 30-foot hole in the middle, and then there's just like a small sunken island that I've never seen any fish on. So I'm like, everything I've read is telling me that's where I need to be fishing, and I've never caught a fish in that area, which is just wild to me.
What species are you going for? I mean, to me, I would be putting brush out there. I'd be dropping Christmas tree tops. I'd be dropping limbs. I'd be putting some kind of plastic Christmas tree out there or something that but somebody else going to find it too, though.
I'm not going to say that I'm not opposed to doing that. I'm just saying I've just bought a fish finder within the last year. Okay. So I haven't really, I just figured this out. I mean, I catch ton of brim in that lake.
Sure.
They're in there. It's one of those lakes that is very good for all sorts of panfish, like crappie and bluegill are the number 1 and 2 fish that I catch in that lake. And I was doing some reading about that. I was like, why are the bass always so small in this lake? I've never caught a bass bigger than like 12, 13 inches in that lake ever in a lifetime of fishing there. And I read in a book about bluegill, it said that lakes that generally don't have great bass size-wise are loaded with really good-sized brim because they just overtake the lake. Exactly. So I'm trying to figure out this puzzle, and I think that's why fishing is so fun, because it is a big puzzle. You're like, you're putting all these pieces together, and I know there's old guys out there catching, 30 fish limits a person every day they go out. So I know they're in there. I just haven't cracked that code yet, and they aren't giving up their spots. You know how some of those guys are.
You just have to be observant where they're at, kind of what they're doing. And then, actually go up to them and say, hey, I'm struggling. I'm new at this. Can you help me out? Most of the old timers will help you. If you don't go in on their territory, run your boat over the top of them, stir up their boat when they're sitting there. Most of the guys I've run across, I try to help people and vice versa.
Well, speaking of your crappie rods, you've been talking about those. I don't know if you're ready to release that information or not, but they sound pretty interesting.
You want to go get one?
Yeah, of course
I don't have a problem. It's fixing to hit the market anyway.
Hey, what's up, everyone? James Appleton here, co-founder of Absolute Aid. Welcome to the Seek to Do More program. This program will help you help yourself by developing the daily habits that will elevate your entire life. Over the next 30 days, you'll complete the doers list every single day. And the doers list includes 1, do something physical. 2, follow and stick to your diet of choice. 3, read a real book. 4, further your education on purpose. 5, dedicate time to your spiritual life. And 6, dedicate time to your hobbies. So if you're ready to take a structured, proven approach to build the daily habits that will allow you to get the most out of yourself, your time, and your life every single day, the Seek to Do More program is your blueprint. So make a choice, commit to yourself, sign up below, and let's get started.
That is a long rod.
This is I think this one is the 13-footer. This is a 13-foot. It has 30 eyes on it.
That's insane.
30 eyes. There's a reason for the 30 eyes. I can't let a lot of secrets out, I guess, but there is a reason for that. And the line is not sticking to the blank when they get wet. Also, when you're doing 30 eyes or 13-foot rods or 11-foot-6, what we designed 11-foot-6 on the 13. If you'll think about it, forward-seeking sonar, we're actually pitching the jig out. It's 13 feet, so it'll pendulum out. And when it hits further out, it has to pendulum back to the boat.
Yep.
And then when it stops under the boat, we can actually do not move your jig. The more you can keep it still, the better you're going to have. So I'm looking down the rod and it's barely wiggling. Don't even wiggle. Don't do this. Because when you look at forward-seeking sonar, like I was telling them, the jigs and the worms and stuff, and that's what we showed the customers the other day. Throw your worm up there, you dig up to that tree, and all of a sudden I said, hey, there's my worm. I said, look how fast it's going. Look how the fish are responding. They can't even catch it up because you're doing this so fast. What do you think that little jig's doing down there, 16,000? It's doing this.
Yeah, moving 8 feet at a time.
And the boat is moving. Think about that a minute. You got a boat just went by. You've got the boat exactly to the water, just on the water, so you can kind of gauge where you need to be. Boat is still, you're going to get more hits. This is carbon fiber.
Oh, man.
I am feeling this all the way up. We have shims up inside here. Anything that's transmitted down this blank goes into this carbon fiber. This is going to be called a sockeye. What was the word I was going to come up? Sockeye.
Slayer.
The sockeye slider, or sockeye in Louisiana means crappie.
Yeah.
But what happens is you can move this anywhere on this slide on the reel. So I can put a reel back here. I'll just tape it on for now, just so to see where we want to do it. So I can hold it up here. I can put a reel up here and hold it back here where I can have leverage and just lift the whole thing. And we were high sticking them on the trip the other day. I wanted to break the rod. So I actually lifted a 2-pound rod vertical, which is what we call high sticking. And that's the most massive you could do that rod. And it didn't break. So these are graphite, super sensitive, but they're not cheap. Mm-hmm. You know, these go start around $600, but it's all quality components, period. Mm-hmm. And that's what the guy said. Also, he said, Stubbe, I could actually flip the jig out. I could flip it without moving the whole rod in the air. Yeah. It's too stiff. Most of them are too stiff. This one, just stick it out by itself. You even breathe on this rod. And he was setting the hook, Captain Gerald. He was setting the hook all the time because he could watch him. I said, you're feeling everything. He said, I realize now I get to have that in my hand for a day to understand the sensitivity on that rod. Mm-hmm. It's not $100 rod you're getting from overseas. That's a whole different bucket.
Yeah. So it's essentially you're kind of going with a futuristic version of cane poling, but like
basically
super high sensitive.
Right. Exactly.
Yeah. So, I've that's one thing that I have not mastered. I have some long rods like that for crappie, and it's just whoops.
My ceiling is 14 feet tall.
Don't pull a Bill Dance on us here.
No.
No ceiling fans.
No,
but yeah, the longer rods like that are they take a while to get used to because they're just they're so unwieldy because they're just so long, and you're used to casting. So you can't really cast a rod like that. You're more so using it vertical.
When you slide that slide up and down where you want it. Get back in there.
So I know you had initially talked about with that rod doing a almost like an ice fishing reel. Are you still considering that? I don't have one here.
Yeah, we can't get them. I've got Derek is going. Well, you're going to ICAST too, right? I've already talked with Derek. Yeah. And he's going to see if he can get with the manufacturer over there so we can see if we can buy them by the hundreds, get them in here as a system that's balanced. Once we get that ice reel on there, we'll actually balance the rod. It's almost balanced now. Look at that.
Yeah.
And that's how we do the fly rods too. I didn't talk about the fly rod. We balance all of our rods. So if you send a reel to me that you're comfortable with your brand, when I build the rod for you, then we actually balance that blank to that reel.
That's pretty important. I noticed that I bought the reel you told me to get with this rod, and it's perfectly balanced. I can hold it, no problem. It's a lot more. I feel like I can hold it for longer, like my arm doesn't wear out as much, which is very nice. And that's another question when you get to the level of obsession with fishing, the equipment does become really important to you. I mean, when you just start out, I mean, you're just getting your feet in the water. You don't really know anything. It's just more important to go catch some fish. But with a fly fishing reel, everybody I've talked to says it's usually about the least important part. Do you agree with that, or is it?
I agree. But if you go for bigger saltwater fish, you have to have the reel that has the drag system that you need on so many poundage to hold everything. That makes sense. You want to put a little bit of bend in the rod, but nothing past 90 degrees or 45. Anything, let me put it to you this way. It's a good general. If you close your eyes on the clock, anything past 10 o'clock is dangerous. You shouldn't be on the lake after 10. You shouldn't be running the roads in the city after 10 o'clock. Anything that rod goes past 10, you put it in the danger zone if you think about it. Okay. Right? Then you're putting it too much curve. So I keep it at 10 o'clock with a little bit of tip in it. I'm going to wear that fish down. Anything past 10 o'clock or 12 o'clock, you're putting too much load on it, and something's going to break.
Okay. That makes sense.
10 o'clock is your danger zone. Okay.
The other thing I noticed is you had me buy a very specific fly line from Orvis.
Right.
Cost almost as much as the reel, but I don't know. It just doesn't. I don't know how to describe it because I don't have the experience yet, but it just feels different than the other fly lines I have that just came with a rod or just some cheap stuff I bought on Amazon to throw on a cheap rod. How does the fly line affect it? Because I mean, there's so many tapers and there's so many different like weight forward and there's specific different tapers of that, and there's floating and sinking, and there's just so many options that it's kind of overwhelming to think about.
Well, go get it. Let me grab one rod if I can. Just bear with me just a second. I mean, we want to answer all the questions for everybody properly. So, okay. This right here is our short flyer. This is a 7'6" rod. It's also balanced with that reel, just like you were saying. This is a 10-weight rod that's balanced. So back to your question was, it seemed like it's balanced to your shoulder. So what happens when you're casting, it's balanced here and it's balanced here. So you're not tearing your rotator cuff up because it's way too heavy forward. You're trying to pull all that load. Okay, so let's go back to line here. In Texas, it gets pretty doggone hot.
Yeah.
So we use what's called a tropical line from Orvis. I'm a Orvis endorsed person. I like their products. I use a lot of their stuff all over. Like this is a 10-weight. It has weight in it. How can I do this? Like a 22 shell is so many grams, right? A 30-06 has so many grams. Same thing with fly line. If I want to be able to load that rod, I have to have enough grain in the forward tip of that. It gets thicker and thicker. I don't know if you can see that. Let me go back down about 20 feet. Can you see the difference on the fly line there? The weight difference?
It's pretty hard to tell on the small screen, but yeah.
Yeah, there's a thinner and then the heavy. So the heavy almost has like a little, I want to say lead. They've got proprietary stuff we can't talk about. But basically, the first part of the head is what actually loads the rod and propels it forward, not the fly. The fly only follows, right? The fly, when it's going forward, it follows. That's all it does.
Yep.
The line right here. So if I want to float on the surface to keep my fly come up within 2-3 feet or a topwater popper, I want a floating line. Now, if I want to intermediate, I'm going to go down about 6 feet. It counts per second. If I want a sinking line, I go to sinking jiggle, get down in the current, things like that. I don't have any of that here. We use a lot of floating lines. I don't know what kind of lines you're using for what you're doing up there, but
go ahead.
Here I use a floating line most of the time. People that come here from other states or different places, they kind of bring some intermediate lines and other things. And what happens when you get that fly down deep, there's so much timber and stump, you've lost the whole gear. Mm-hmm. You're not going to get it back, guys. Just stay with the floating stuff and then break your tip it off or something like that. But when you get down so deep and you start stretching all this stuff, trying to pull and break, you're in trouble. You're fighting that all day.
Yeah, and that was going to be a question I was going to ask about the sinking line. Is I know there's intermediate and then there's full sink.
Right, all that.
Mm-hmm. A lot of the stuff that I'm fishing is, well, obviously that one, like I said, has zero structure in it besides weeds. So I was considering buying the Orvis has the reel insert where you can just replace the reel and you can have it loaded with the fly line. Right. I was considering getting some either intermediate or even full sink fly line because I fish a lot with standard gear. I fish a lot on the bottom and I seem to have better success that way. Okay. But I really want to dive deep with the fly rod. Just be able to catch fish on the fly rod is just more exciting, I feel like. Because, I like ripping crankbaits and stuff too because you nail them. And then, but it's like the fight isn't the same. And I know that sounds maybe pretentious, but it is. I've just noticed that it's a different feeling Like that first picture I sent you catching a pretty okay sized bass on this fly rod you sent me. It was just like a life-changing experience. I was like, I got obsessed with it. And I want to catch some of those bigger ones, but I've mostly caught them down on the bottom of these lakes. Right. I don't know if they're just using the weed edges as like way down deep as cover or whatever. But would you recommend trying that if I'm not concerned about getting it broke off or something? Or would I just stick to the floating line? Because I just can't get it deep enough sometimes. And I don't think heavier flies are the way to go in that scenario.
No, because you don't have the equipment to really launch that whole fly, and really have the power. They don't really build power stuff like I build power.
Yeah.
Because it's not sold to the masses. I'm an individual who does combat fishing on the timber that I'm seeing out here. We're dragging them out, winching them out per se. We'll winch. It's a different model. What I would probably recommend is try to find somebody that has a fly club in your area and go talk to the people there to say, hey, I do fish that lake. This is the kind of lines we use in the sink rate and the kind of flies we use. And you would save a lot of money if you go to somebody that already said, hey, I've even got some I don't use anymore. I'll give it to you for pay $20 for it or something instead of going out and buying $100 a line. That didn't work. That didn't work. That didn't work. I've been there.
Well, unfortunately, those don't really exist around me.
Oh, really?
It's just like around you. I mean, there's a majority of people are not fly fishing.
No, there are some, 1%, less than 1%.
And I think the one fly shop we do have here, I think they're going under. So I don't know if they're going to be around anymore. So we have a Bass Pro essentially is where we get our fly equipment. So that's why I'm asking, because I'm not opposed to buying some line just to have like an intermediate sinking line and just going for it. Since I already have the reel, the interchangeable piece is only about $50. And if I spend $80 to $100 on new fly line, I mean, I'm going to have this rod forever unless I break it or do something stupid.
Well, don't do that. Bill Dan says, don't do that.
Yeah, well, that's always the intention. You never want to break the rod.
Don't do. No, we'll take care of it. We got plenty of rods. You can see I'm rod poor. So.
Yeah, well, I know that feeling. So,
only thing I could tell you, Paul, is give me a call. We'll go through it on the computer together over the phone and say, hey, I recommend this line to do what you're doing because of the temperature zone, things like that. And the colder water you get, you have to have a different makeup in the fly line itself, in the polymers.
Yeah. So the name Mudfish Adventures, that's something we didn't touch on yet. How did you come up with that one? Because it's a cool name.
I know, but it has nothing to do with what we're doing. But basically, it came from Mudfish Adventures, came from Mud Motors. It has a mud motor on the back.
Okay.
Mud motor is just a lawnmower, zero radius mower, and it has a shaft down the back with a big fly belt like you have on a dragster, and it has a prop out the back. So we said, well, could we call it Mud Motor Fishing Adventure? That's just too much. So I said, why don't we just do Mudfish Adventures? And then I called for the 1-800 number, and I got the 1-844 number at Mudfish. So I said, hey, that's it. Good enough for me. But, awesome. But when you say mudfish, that doesn't mean anything about fly fishing. When you say that, doesn't mean anything about crappie fishing.
Yeah.
It doesn't mean anything about brim fishing. See, it's kind of like it's a catch-22. People say change the name, but I've been doing this a long time. It is what it is, and we're going to go with it. I'm not going to change it.
Yeah. Hey, it's your company. You do what you want.
Well, hey, thank you. Appreciate it. You ought to do this, you ought to do that, but they don't pay the bills. Great answer.
Hey, man.
The bills.
I deal with the same stuff with the podcast. People are always telling me what I should be doing. I was like, well, I mean, I'm the one who has to sit here and edit all this stuff all day long, so I understand why, but you gotta do what you gotta do on your own end too sometimes, and it takes a lot of work, man. A lot of this stuff isn't just like, oh, it's 10 minutes here. How long does it take you to build a rod? A week?
A week, yeah. And people say, well, I want it for $200. I had some guys want 10 crappie rods. Well, dude, I can't just kick them out like that. I got to get the parts in. It takes time. Their freight bill is, just for 6 plates was $150 the other day. You got to add that to it. And then the federal taxes was $90 on top of for the sporting goods tax. They don't even think about those numbers, and we got, $500,000 building. I got overhead too. It's not buddy. I can't do the buddy system anymore. It doesn't work anymore. It's a business. Yeah. So we charge accordingly, but I do look at it like I wouldn't pay that for that, but you can't look at it that way anymore. I can't buy a hamburger and a Coke the other day. It was $16 when I come off the lake. Just a hamburger and french fries. It was $16. You got to be kidding me.
Yeah.
You know, it is what it is. And just like go back to the sonar. You know, I've got just one unit. I got $5,000 in that one unit. Mm-hmm. And the guy says, you know, I'll pay $500 for the trip. I got $5,000 on one little piece of block on this boat, not counting all the other equipment on it. So,
well, yeah, I've run into the same thing doing video work too. I mean, people are like, "Will you come and record a video for me?" And I'm like, "Well, what's your budget?" And they're like, "Oh, like $200." I was like, "I could take a picture." You know, I'm using a $4,000 camera, dude. Like,
it's fun. I like doing what I'm doing, but it does have a cost factor. If you want to play the game, we can play the game.
That's another thing, though. I mean, when you're talking a quality rod that's hand built,
thank you,
one by one,
yes,
is a lot different than going to Bass Pro and picking up $100 rod off the shelf. Those are two different levels of what
not even. I can't even comprehend.
It's like you're having a rod built for you as a person with your size of your hand and, you know, all these different facets. Whereas you go to the store, you're just getting something off of a shelf that was pre-made by the thousands and thousands and thousands. So yeah, well, now that you bring that up, how do you fit it? How do you fit it? Well, I meant the display. How do you fit a rod to someone's hand specifically? Because I got big hands, you know. Probably takes a
Okay. There is a standard in the industry like this.
Yep.
That's round so much, it's fatter back here. You put your thumb for the power, stuff like that. But what happened about 3 years ago? I was doing a rod deal in Dallas, a rod show, and I was demonstrating my fly rods and this and that compared to the other manufacturers across the pond in that facility. And Chinese lady walked up to me, small stature, small hand. She said, "You got woman rods. I can't cast man's rod." Thinking she's not a point. You got a point. So what I did, I made her put her hand on a piece of paper, and I drew her hand like a turkey, like we did in a little high school, right? Kind of get her size of her hand. I went back and machined different sizes. You can see how this has a different size from that on the diameter for a lady. So what happened is I sent her 3 different ones, 3 different sizes, because they're all going to have the same length pretty well. 3 different sizes, different weights, different. Each one of these is a custom build. There's no 2 bottoms of a stump the same. And she got to pick the 3rd one or which one she wanted. We built the rod off of that, and she's happy ever after because it matched her hand. It's comfortable for her anywhere in the world she wants to go. That's her rod for her life. Mm-hmm. And then I have a blueprint. We do blueprints. So I have everything she needs when I need it. She wants another one. We'll build a fiberglass one. We'll do a perch plucker with that kind of same size handle and let her pick it out. This is all exotic woods. This is what we call a cottonwood. It's made different. It's at the base of a tree that we have people that have lumber companies. They see a stump from me. They'll get the stump. They'll cut it out in blocks. We have to let it dry for 2.5 years, and then we oil it. We actually put maybe 10, 12 oil on top of this. This is not varnish or clear. It's an oil. I work with Bill Krau's Custom Calls, duck call guy, and I work closely with him. He actually does the blanks for me, and then we finish them up when they get here, do the final sanding and all, and oil them and all. So he has 30 years of building duck calls in the environment that we're in, water. So I trust the man. He's helped me out, and that's kind of where the handles come from. So
that's awesome.
It's endless where my mind goes to build this stuff. So yeah, that's not a store bought. You just don't store bought that and say it's $200. That's not our game.
Well, it was funny because the other day I was out. I went to Washington D.C. and my brother and I were kind of getting bored of doing the whole going and seeing the downtown and all the sights and stuff. And so I'm like, hey, I brought 2 fly rods. Let's just go screw around. He's never fly fished in his life.
Oh, wow. Great.
And so, I mean, I had like the cheap, like Amazon rod with me, like the $50
I understand.
thing. No, and I had that, and I had the TFO rod because I didn't know if we were actually going to fish. So I didn't want to haul around a $500 rod and not pull it out and leave it in the car and get it stolen or something.
Stolen,
yeah. I was fishing with the TFO rod a little bit, which it's not a bad
You're
rod.
fine.
It's not a,
we're not saying that.
And I'm like having fun, and I set his rod up when he gets there, and I just start casting it, and I felt the rod wiggle all the way through the handle, and I was like, I don't like this. This is gross. It felt like I was doing a disservice to fishing in general. Like I felt that inside the grip, the rod was wiggling and bending, and I was like, this something's not. And now, like it was that exact moment where I understood the difference in what you sent me all the way down to the $50 rod, and I was like, it all makes sense now.
Yeah,
I still caught a fish, so whatever.
No, I'm not knocking their brand. A lot of people use them in a lot of places. That's what they usually do. They're good stuff, but I just do something different. I'm real anal about when it goes, it's got my name on it. So if it ain't right, it ain't leaving. And we actually test everything. I'm right on the water. We test it before it ever comes to you. I'm going to get it dirty for a day, because if I can't break it, I know you can't break it. So I'm not going to send it to you. Hey, it broke on the first cast. I know better than that, because I had it in the boat all day. Mm-hmm. I know better. Yeah. So, but I haven't really had a problem with breaking rods. We use quality blanks. I don't use a little cheap blank. Everything we had was quality stuff.
Well, I got one last question for you, and then we'll wrap it up, because you and I could talk all day. We're both talkers. I'll have to get down there and get on the boat, and we can talk all day. So I like to ask this question to guides, because you have exponentially more experience than your average weekend warrior. You know what I mean? You do this professionally, and a lot of my show is geared towards people who maybe are just getting into stuff. Maybe this is their first time even considering fly fishing or fishing at all, or they're just kind of learning the ropes. So the scenario I like to put you in, and this is all hypothetical. It's not real. It probably will never happen. But I'm going to say you're blindfolded. I hire someone to pick you up in a car, drop you off at a X random lake you've never been to in your whole life. You've never been there. You don't know anything about it. It's just you with your legs. And you pull up and they're like, here's $100. There's a Walmart across the street. That's all you get. You can go. All you're doing is going fishing. You have $100 to get a full outfit, a rod, you got to get your bait or your lures, whatever you want, and then you have access to the whole lake. You don't have a boat or anything, though. You just got to go fish and figure it out. So you're in trouble. This is a scenario that I run into. Yeah. It's not made up, because I run into this scenario every time I travel. I literally did this exact thing with my sister-in-law in DC. We had we just went to a Walmart and got her fully outfitted for $40 or something. So you have $100. What are you going to do? What is your plan of attack? You're going to walk in, go to the fishing section. What are you going to do to get that money and get out on the water as soon as possible? You have a fishing license too. We'll throw that in for a freebie. You already have the fishing license.
What if I've got, do I get lunch out of that $100 too?
That's up to you. It depends on how hungry you are.
Okay. Well, I want to catch something to eat, so I can't count that out either. I would probably just buy a push button combo, not the bottom end, but something probably in a 25, 30 range that I could catch a catfish or a bass or anything that's heavy enough. And I would probably a combo sometimes would come with a little worm kit, a hook kit, a couple of weights or whatever. That's all I really need. I can catch a grasshopper on the bank. I can go move some leaves around and pick up a worm. I don't have to really buy bait per se. Most of those combos come with a little bobber and probably a couple of little worms or a little small rattle trap or something like that. That's kind of what I would do for the pricing. And then the other $50, I'd have to buy them some refreshments. And then and then I would have to go give me a cheeseburger, fries, and another refreshment.
I love that answer.
You got to have fun with it. I can't blow all my money because they might not bite that day. But if they do, I still have fun, and I still got enough gear that I can handle them with, right? And then I can still go talk to the guy next to me. Hey, man, what's going on? You got anything I can try in your box I can borrow? And then you never take it back. Yeah.
Well, so are you just gonna run to the bank and start fan casting around and see what happens, or you have a plan? You're gonna look for certain things on the environment that you're like, ooh, this is going to be a good spot?
Well, I would want a windy blown bank. First of all, I want the wind blowing against the bank because it's blowing plankton and small things to the bank, which your bait fish will be feeding on, and then your game fish will be feeding on those small bait. Does that make sense? Yep. I want to go to the windy side. I don't want to be on the small, smooth, calm side because there's nothing happening. The water's moving. It's turning up like a washing machine. Something's always moving. It's always growing, always getting after it, something, eating something. You know, they eat for a living. They just don't sit there. They eat for a living. So,
me too, unfortunately. It's a problem sometimes.
I know. I got you. But that's what I would do. And then I'd look for shade or some weeds or something where they can, because they don't have eyelids, right? So they have to be in the shade somewhere. So I've already got current coming in. I got bait coming. I've got shade. It's a perfect condition for me. It's going to be cooler than anywhere else on the lake because the water temperature is going to drop 2 to 3 degrees, maybe 5 degrees in that cooler area. Everything's blowing in there. I got everything I need. That's what I would do.
Perfect. That's a wonderful answer. My favorite part of that answer was that you wanted to get a cheeseburger. I love that. That would be my first thing. I'd do that first, and then I would go get the rest of this fishing stuff.
Well, what happened the other day, I was out with Captain Gerald and the guys from Wager Baits. They were testing the crappie stuff. And we got on the water at 7 o'clock. We come off the water at 4, and all I had was some crackers and some water, basically. I was just watching. I didn't even put my hand on the rod. I watched them work their rods, how they were working, how I can redesign some things, how they hold them. But I was dreaming of that brand new hamburger place that my wife and I went earlier that week. I think, man, that was the juiciest I've ever had. I got to get by there. Hope they're not closed by 5 when I get there. It was the best $16 I ever spent. Big onion rings, big as that, home done. It wasn't frozen and that burger. I didn't want to get it on my shirt, my name on it. I had to lean over and just drip it into the basket. I was like, I'm in heaven. I'm a fishing guide on beautiful Lake Toledo Bend. I'm fishing. I'm having a hamburger. I'm out with friends. Paul, what else could you ask for me? I'm so blessed. It's so
not
cool.
Much, my friend. Not much.
Not much.
Well,
and I had an orange drink. I didn't have anything alcoholic. It was an orange drink. Fanta orange. But go ahead. Okay.
Well, thanks for coming on the podcast. I've been wanting to do this for a while. It's just we both are super busy all the time. I would encourage people to check out your website if they haven't already. Go to mudfishadventures.com, correct?
Yes, sir. That's correct, yeah.
And that's where they can...
Go ahead.
Well, I was going to say they can find your fly rods there now. You have your update in your website here soon, and then you can book you for a guide, which I will be doing in the next year or so because I really want to come fishing with you. It will be a really good time. Well,
in the springtime, the bass are pretty heavy, and then probably around April, May, all the crappie are up shallow with fly rods. It's just a hoot. Go from there. I don't really have my rods per se on the website. We're trying to get that going, but I'm afraid if we open that door to the floodgates, I will not have any time to myself. It's everything is built by me, period. I really don't want to do a production build. Do you have a serial number on yours? On your rod? I don't know. I don't think we started back then.
Nope.
Okay.
It just says Mudfish Adventures.
Okay. This is going to a good friend of ours. It's basically the same blank you have. But check this out. And I know you want to go, but
I could stay here all day.
All carbon fiber. You know who this one's going to?
If I had to make a guess, I would think it would probably be Chester Moore.
Right.
I knew it.
It has a serial number on it. It has Mudfish on it. It's a special build. And from now on, as of this started, anything that I build will have a serial number on it that it was custom built by me. In case the company blows up to another level, which that's a blessing, but I can't control that. If we do open the doors, then these are going to be highly priced. That means that Scooby built that for a lifetime. It's quality. I'm not saying that we're going to drop the quality, but when you have other people that you can't watch while you're doing something else, something's going to fall through the cracks.
Did I get to see Chester's rod before he did?
Yes, you did.
Yeah, I'm going to rub that in his face. I'm going to see him in like a week. Beautiful. Well, Scooby, thank you, my man.
All carbon, baby.
I can't
all carbon in here. This is carbon.
That looks so amazing.
Yeah.
So I can't thank you enough, man. Thank you for the rod. And before we go, I want you have a podcast coming out soon. I've already heard it because I've been editing it for you.
Right. You're the man.
What's your plan for the podcast? Because you've already had quite a few good guests. I know because I also interviewed all of them.
Okay.
So what's your plan for this podcast? Let the people know.
Well, there's so many, and this is what's been happening here. As I do the report for the Parks and Wildlife every week, and meeting all you guys at the podcast and how dynamic and things are. So much stuff out there. I've done radio for probably 20 years, but there's nothing, when you do radio, that word is gone. There's no way to capture that again. Mm-hmm. So the podcast is such a unique vehicle that we can always go back and look at it and go back and look at it and learn from it and learn from it and learn from it. So as going around the lake at different marinas and talking to people come out of the water, oh, that guy used to sell worms. What? He used to manufacture. That's the guy I want on a podcast. This other guy used to build wooden boats, race boats. I want to talk about that on a podcast. It's just, my mind's flooded with people. I got 7 or 8, maybe 10 people ready to go again. So we already got 20 episodes, but I've got to get the first ones in the cans with your help. I know you've been pushing me. It's just, I'm only one guy. And when you get up at 3 a.m. on the boat at 5 and you come in and you back out tonight again and reload the boat, it's a one-man show. I love what I do. I'm not complaining.
I know that feeling well. So we'll wrap it up here, Captain Scooby. But thank you again, and I will let the good folks know when your podcast comes out on my podcast. So
okay.
Thank you, and we'll wrap it up here.
All right. Woo-hoo. See you next time.
Hey, thanks for listening to the Aptitude Outdoors podcast. If you're getting anything out of this, if you're learning something, if it's helped you in any way, go down in the link below and buy me a coffee. Throw me $1, throw me $2. We greatly appreciate it. Just using it to keep this ship afloat. So thank you very much.